2013 wasn't a bad year for us. We became self-sufficient, we got a honey crop, the weather wasn't too bad, but the year is just about at its close now. So welcome to self-sufficient in Suburbia for autumn 2013. We're having quite a low egg yield at the moment, and I want to show you one of the reasons why. As you can see, Attila here, who is one of our light Sussex hens, has been molting, and molting quite heavily. And you can see lots of the new feathers growing through there. And what happens when they are molting is that they put their energy into growing new feathers rather than into laying. So with 15 hens at the moment, we're only getting about 4 or 5 eggs a day, because Attila there is not the only one who is molting. So at the minute we're just having to put up with quite a few eggs less per day than we are normally used to. This is Houdini. She's one of our copper blacks, Marin copper blacks. Beautiful bird, but as you can see, she's molting as well, and lost a lot of feathers all over her body, but particularly on her neck, and you can see the new ones growing through. So she would normally lay beautiful dark brown eggs, and at the minute she's laying nothing. So we expect to be over this molting period in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, but it means far fewer eggs than we would want. Just a few of our tomatoes from our greenhouse and our polytunnel, and you can turn them into sauces, you can turn them into soups, but what we're going to do with these last remaining tomatoes that we've got from the allotment is to pickle them. And to make sure that your tomatoes do get pickled right the way through, skewer the medium to larger ones a couple of times and the smaller ones once, and then pack them into jars ready for pickling. That's one of the jars of tomatoes ready to be pickled. So now we're going to make the pickling vinegar. Into a pan put 800 millilitres of white vinegar, 800 mils of water, and a handful of cloves, peppercorns and coriander seeds, then 4 tablespoons of sugar and salt. Then bring to the boil and make sure it is well stirred. This solution is as much brine as it is pickling vinegar, so you may find, according to your own taste, that it's a bit too salty and you might want to put a little bit more sugar in. I'm going to leave it as it is, because it will mix with the juices of the tomatoes and help reduce the salty taste of the brine. But if you want a bit more sugar in, that's up to you. Just add in sufficient to keep your taste buds happy. When it's come up to the boil, leave it to simmer for about 3 minutes, and then add the pickling solution to the pickling jars. And there we have one of the 5 jars of pickled tomatoes, which I'm going to have to put down because it's still rather hot. But we'll be using these up over the winter. We are approaching the end of October, and that means Halloween's coming up. Now, years ago, when I was young, which really was years ago, we made Halloween lanterns from big turnips. And then since then, we have used pumpkins. And I was in the supermarket this morning and had these sort of football-size pumpkins for sale at quite a price. But I've got a pumpkin here, which I'm going to show you in a minute, which I swapped with one of the local allotment societies for some of our honey. So I'm just going to get it for you. Here it is. I weighed it and it is 22 kilos, which in old money is about somewhere about like 45 pounds. And what we're going to do today is make some pumpkin soup. Well, the first thing we need to do is to get all the flesh from the inside, and that means cutting away like this. This will be used to make a Halloween lantern. This is it, here it comes. And there is the flesh. You can see how thick it is on here. The first job to do is in a pan, melt some butter and add in 1 kilo of chopped pumpkin. And whilst you're doing that, you can see the kettle in the background is boiling up some water for stock. So get that underway. And then add in a couple of chopped carrots, 1 chopped onion and 1 stick of chopped celery. Give an occasional stir to make sure that it's cooking evenly right the way through, and then you can add 3 cloves of garlic, nicely crushed. And again, just give that a stir and keep cooking it, keep heating it through until the vegetables have softened. Then you need to add 2 teaspoonfuls of turmeric. That will help with the colouring. And mix that up. And then the vegetable stock that we made earlier needs to be added, and you'll need 1.5 litres. Once it's boiling, turn the heat down and let it simmer for half an hour. Everything is now fully cooked through, so what we're going to do is just blend this with my blender here. Moment of truth time. Very difficult to hold a hot bowl, but that was lovely. Nice creamy texture to it. So since we've got huge quantity of pumpkins, I suspect we'll be having lots of pumpkin soup over the next few weeks. We've had quite a storm in the past week, and we've had a bit of damage caused by it, and if you can see behind me, that is a polytunnel, and it's not supposed to be there. It should be over on the far side of the site next to the goat paddock, where it got blown right over the allotment a few days ago, and it ended up here. Actually, it ended up on the greenhouse next to it, and as you can see, it's on its side, looking like a bit like a beached whale at the moment. So our job now is to move it, but we have decided not to put it back on the site where it originally was, because we're going to extend the goat run at that site, and instead that is going to go into the far corner on that side of the allotment on one of the beds that I cleared a couple of weeks ago that had a potato crop on it. Here is another of our pumpkins. So not actually the biggest one that we have. So we've already made pumpkin soup and pumpkin pie, and today we're going to make some pumpkin jam. Into your jam pan, put the flesh of your pumpkin chopped and weighed, and make sure you remove any seeds as well, and then add into it the same weight of chopped apples, and then you're going to need to add a little bit of water just to make sure that the bottom of the pan is covered to stop it catching on, and then apply heat and bring to the boil. Well, once it's boiling, turn the heat down and let it simmer. Well, once the fruit has softened right through, you then need to add the sugar, and you need the same weight of sugar as you have of pumpkin and apple combined. Once it's back up to heat, keep it on a rolling boil and then keep testing it until it reaches the setting point. So put a bit on a saucer and let it cool down, and if it thickens up like that, and you can run your finger through it and it doesn't all slop around all over the place, then it's ready to go into hot sterilised jars. There's one of the 12 jars of pumpkin and apple jam just made, and the thing is, I've still got 3 very large pumpkins to use up, so I'm still on the hunt for some interesting pumpkin recipes. It's not just been the polytunnel that we've had a problem with over the past week. We've had some rather bad news about our ducks. Unfortunately, another 3 fell victim to local foxes, and even worse, last month when we lost 2 ducks, we decided to put some of our eggs in the incubator, and they were due to hatch this coming Monday, and unfortunately there was a terrible accident with the incubator. It got knocked off its stand, and of the 6 eggs that were in there, unfortunately 4 of them got smashed. Now I've listened to the 2 remaining eggs and I can hear movement inside them, and one of them I could even hear quacking in. So hopefully this coming Monday those eggs will hatch. But the one bright bit of news from the past week to do with the ducks, I'm just going to turn around because I think they're behind me. Yep, you can see them there. Is that previously we had 2 different groups. It was an adult group and their offspring group, and the reason why they didn't mix was because the dominant male in the adult group chased away the younger ones. But since we have now lost the dominant male, he was one of the ones that got caught by the foxes the other night, then what was left of the 2 groups have now merged into one, and it is the male within the younger ducks, who's actually the offspring of the previous khaki male who got killed the other night. He's now the dominant duck, he's the dominant drake within that group, and it's a very coherent group. So that's the good news. Unfortunately, it's the only bit of good news from past week in terms of the ducks, and it's really knocked on the head our egg production figures as well. Last week we were given 2 teal ducks like that and a pheasant. Now, I say given, we swapped them for some of our cakes and lemon curd, so that's what we used to pay for them. Now, normally when we pluck and gut these, we would throw out the feathers, but the ducks have a lovely soft downy feathering, and what we're going to do is we're going to keep those feathers, and we're actually going to make a quilt with them, a nice warm quilt. So we'll sterilise those feathers at some point, but we're going to pluck and gut these. Here's one I've already prepared. We will be having both of those ducks tonight roasted. These are the 2 duck now plucked and gutted. So the first job we're going to do is to stuff them with apple. This is apple that has been stewed for a few minutes with a bit of cinnamon and ground mace. We have in the pan 4 tablespoonfuls of red wine vinegar, add 25 grams of butter and about half a teaspoonful of sugar, and then a bit of pepper and salt. Then need to bring it up to the boil, and then we're going to use it to baste the ducks. You then need your oven at 200 degrees centigrade, and these go in for half an hour. They've actually had just over half an hour. We checked them earlier on and they weren't quite done, but I'm expecting them to be ready now. There we go. Just about ready for my dinner. So here we have the final meal. One teal duck on a slice of fried bread. I think the posh name for it is crouton, and sautéed potatoes. That's the posh name. It's fried potatoes and runner beans. So I'm off to enjoy my meal now. Well, there is the goat run in the corner. Here where the green bags are was where the polytunnel was, and next to it are the hen houses. And just for reference purposes, there's our first polytunnel, and to the other side of it is the frame of the polytunnel that we've had to move. Now back here, this is the patch that we want to extend the goat run onto. Now we're undecided yet as to whether we keep the hen houses in here, because one of the problems that we'd have with that is that the goats could climb onto the hen houses and then be over these rather high fences that we have, so we don't want them to be doing that. But whether we move the hen houses or not, this area will more than double the size of the goat run, and we will be able to get some more goats. And we'll be getting milking goats, because our goats here, our 2 little goats, Geraldine and Georgina, turn out not to be milking goats. They are pygmy goats, so we won't get any milk from them, but we are still planning to breed them. You may think that in November there's not much of an opportunity to go foraging because all the fruit's gone from the trees, the berries have gone, the leaves are rapidly disappearing, but you'd be wrong to assume that there's nothing out there to forage for. And one of the things that we tend to find is that there's a lot of hawberries around in the middle of November, and what we're going to do is use these back in the kitchen to make hawberry jelly. Well, here in the kitchen, the first job to do is to get all your hawberries into your preserving pan. Don't waste time trying to strip off leaves and stalks. Life's too short to do that. Just get them all into the pan and then make sure that that's all covered with water. So once the water's in, put that on the cooker and bring to the boil. When it's come up to the boil, turn the heat down and let it simmer for at least a couple of hours. This is what you want it to be like. It's had over 2 hours now, probably closer to 3. It's now, but it's boiled down quite a bit, reduced down quite a bit, and the berries are soft right through, all mushy, so this is now ready to be strained. The pulp has been straining overnight, and that's what we've got, and the next job is to measure this and put it back into the jam pan. When it's come up to the boil, add 1 kilo of sugar for every litre of liquid, but keep the heat back under it so you can bring it back up to the boil again. Well, once it's come back up to the boil, you need to check for the setting point, and that's very straightforward to do that. Just put a dollop on a saucer like that, let it cool down, and if it forms skin, then it's reached its setting point and it's ready to go into hot sterilised jars. Well, as you can see, the frame of the polytunnel has been moved to the bed behind me. That's going to be its new permanent home, and to be able to move it we had to chop down all the artichokes that we had growing. Now that's no bad thing, because all the stalks were dead and the artichokes were due to, or at least start picking them. We like to leave them in the ground until we use them, because they store better in the ground. But we have a monumental sized crop of artichokes this year, Jerusalem artichokes. This is just the pickings from the surface, or some of them. There's another bucket load. We have an awful lot more in the ground to pick, so we'll be doing an awful lot of cooking with artichokes over the coming months. But I love these things. I think they're absolutely gorgeous when they're roasted, and I've never seen these ever for sale in supermarkets. Not that we go shopping in supermarkets very often nowadays, but I like a number of different foods. It's not really part of our British diet anymore, and I'm determined to get it back onto our dinner tables. Well, really been looking forward to this. This is the trout that we traded for the other day, or one of the 4 trout that we traded for. So this is our very own version of fish and chips, or trout and baked potato wedges. But we've been looking for somebody to swap with for fish for some time, and we've now done it. So I'm off to enjoy this. There's a little village up the road from where we live called Marley Hill, and it has a wonderful community centre, and I'm actually one of the trustees of the building and of the community association, and around the building is a huge amount of completely unused land, and I've come up with this idea that we should try and get our hands on this land and turn it into community gardens, into allotments, areas for kids to have their own allotments and growing space as well. And we're just starting the process of doing that, of getting our hands on that land, and we've got loads and loads of hoops to jump through and a ton of bureaucracy to clear before we're able to do it officially. But this unused land that's lain here for decades unused hopefully will at some point be some great community assets in terms of gardening for local residents. But as it's quite overgrown, we've brought the goats up here today, and they're making a start on clearing the weeds. lantern from Halloween the other day, and I'm not going to waste this. I'm going to see if my goats and my hens want to eat what's left of it. Well, the goats seem to be a little bit interested in it, so I'm going to give these bits to the hens. You may recognise the room that we're in now if you've seen some of our previous programmes. It's our spare room, and in our house our spare room is used for all sorts of other things that you would not associate with a spare room, such as storing pumpkins and marrows, but also it's where we keep our incubator. Now, we've had one or two difficulties with the ducks in the past week, lost too many of them to foxes, and we also managed to knock over the incubator and destroy 4 of the 6 eggs in it. But at the end of quite a bad week for the ducks, we have a little bit of good news, because the 2 surviving eggs managed to hatch, and we have these 2 lovely little ducklings. Now, we hope to keep them here for a few weeks, and when they're big enough we're going to take both of them over to the allotment and introduce them to the other ducks that we have there, and hopefully they'll join the group of ducks that we have and integrate themselves with it. But these are 3 days old now, so they're already growing quite rapidly, and they make quite a bit of noise as well. In my hand, a little duckling that was hatched just 3 days ago, and we put the eggs on because we'd lost a number of ducks to foxes recently, and in this hand I have one of the ducklings that hatched about 4 weeks ago, and this little guy here is going to go to the allotment shortly, and it's a bit too cold for a small bird like this to be outdoors, so we're going to put them in the greenhouse, and they'll be there for a few weeks until it starts to get warmer and they've built up a bit more fat and they've got a little bit bigger, and hopefully they'll join the group of ducks that we've already got over there. So this little guy here is going to be here for a few weeks yet. I'm going to put him back in the litter box. So that's it for autumn 2013. Today is December the 21st, so it's the shortest day. So for us, the cycle starts tomorrow, the annual cycle of getting ready for the crops and growing our own food. But I'm pleased to say that in the past year, this was when we became largely self-sufficient. So for us, supermarkets are now a rare trip that we make. And the coming year, we've got lots of plans. We're going to be getting turkeys, more goats, we're going to milk production, we're going to get more bees, we're going to get quails, we've got a little bit more land that we need to develop, and we're looking at keeping pigs as well. So big year ahead for us, so hopefully you'll join us then. So all the best for the new year, and see you in 2014. You as well.